The plasma bolt missed Captain Jake Miller's head by centimeters, scorching the bulkhead behind him. He didn't flinch. 3 Korthax warriors charged through the breached airlock, their mandibles clicking in what passed for their species' war cry. Jake's team moved like water, flowing around obstacles that would have stopped conventional soldiers cold. Lisa Grant put 2 rounds through the first alien's thorax before it finished crossing the threshold. The creature's exoskeleton cracked like glass. Purple ichor sprang across the deck plating. She was already moving, sliding beneath a support beam as return fire chewed through the space where she'd been standing. Breach point 3. Same deck. Came the voice of Danny Cruz over the comm. He was somewhere in the ventilation system, a place no sane soldier would choose to fight. But sanity had never been a requirement for the unit. The Korthax had made a fatal mistake when they boarded the civilian transport. They thought humans would negotiate, would value the 300 sleeping colonists enough to surrender. They didn't understand what the small patch on Jake's shoulder meant. The simple eagle and trident design that made alien commanders check their star charts for the nearest exit. Jake's blade found the gap in the second warrior's armor, the spot where the neck plates separated. The Korthax gurgled, a wet sound that ended abruptly. These weren't soldiers. They were pirates, raiders who picked soft targets. They'd never faced humans who'd been trained in the deep black, who'd learned warfare from instructors that had terrified Earth's enemies for centuries. The third warrior retreated, finally understanding its error. 7 more signatures, converging on the bridge, said Amy Wilson from her position in the server room. She'd spliced into the ship's sensors within minutes of boarding. They're trying to access the cryobay. Jake's jaw tightened. The colonists were families, children, people who'd saved for decades to buy passage to the frontier worlds. The Korthax wanted to ransom them, sell them, or worse. Danny, cut them off at Junction 4. Lisa, Amy. With me. They moved through the corridors like ghosts. The Korthax had numbers, had weapons designed to punch through starship hulls. What they didn't have was training that started before dawn and ended after midnight, that continued in jungles and deserts and frozen wastes. They didn't have the doctrine written in blood across a dozen worlds. The bridge doors exploded inward. Jake didn't wait for the smoke to clear. He went through firing, trusting his team to cover the angles he couldn't see. 2 Korthax dropped immediately. The others scattered, trying to find cover in a space designed for navigation, not combat. It was over in 30 seconds. Jake stood among the bodies, his breathing steady despite the adrenaline. The ship's captain emerged from behind an overturned console, eyes wide with shock. "Who are you people?" Jake looked at the patch on his shoulder. "Just Special Forces, Captain. Just Special Forces." The aftermath was always quieter than the fight. Jake watched Lisa check each Korthax body with professional thoroughness, while Amy restored the ship's primary systems. The civilian captain, a merchant spacer named Peter Walsh, kept staring at them like they'd materialized from nightmare. "The distress beacon only went out 20 minutes ago," Peter said, his voice still shaky. "You couldn't have been more than a light minute away." "We were closer," Jake replied. He didn't elaborate. The Korthax had been hitting civilian transports along this route for 3 months. His team had been hunting them for 2. Danny emerged from an access panel, covered in coolant residue, and looking pleased with himself. Their ship's still docked. "I disabled the separation clamps. They're not going anywhere." The Korthax vessel was a modified hauler, bristling with weapons that violated at least 6 treaties. Pirates always upgraded their ships, thinking firepower made them invincible. They never invested in training, in discipline, in the 1,000 small skills that turned ordinary people into weapons. "Their captain's still aboard," Amy said, pulling data from the transport sensors. "Along with 12 crew. They left the boarding party to secure the ship while they prepped the cargo hold for the colonists. For people who'd never held a weapon, never trained for combat, who trusted that civilization's rules applied everywhere. The Korthax had learned those rules didn't include humans who wore the trident. "Lisa, Danny, you're with me." Amy, keep this boat running, and make sure our friend Peter stays calm. The airlock connection between ships was a narrow tube, barely wide enough for one person. Jake went first, moving in the zero-gravity transition with practiced ease. The Korthax ship's interior smelled of ammonia and rot. The atmosphere adjusted for their biochemistry. His helmet's filters kicked in automatically. The first crew member they encountered was in the galley, mandibles deep in something that might have been food. Danny's suppressed weapon made a sound like a cough. The creature slumped over its meal. They moved through the ship with brutal efficiency. The Korthax crew wasn't prepared for boarders. Why would they be? They were the ones who did the boarding, who struck fear into civilian vessels. The concept of humans coming for them, hunting them in their own ship, didn't compute until it was too late. Lisa cleared the engineering section while Jake and Danny pushed toward the bridge. Two Korthax tried to make a stand at a bulkhead door. They had plasma rifles, had cover, had every advantage. They didn't have 300 hours of close-quarters battle drills. They didn't have muscle memory that turned reaction into reflex. The bridge was a disaster of alien design, consoles arranged for creatures with different limbs and sensory organs. The Korthax captain stood in the center, a massive specimen with scars across its carapace. It had seen combat before, had survived encounters that killed lesser beings. It reached for a weapon. Jake was faster. "Don't," he said, his rifle steady. "You're worth more alive than dead." The captain's translator crackled. "You are human special forces. The ones the Vrexian Dominion speaks of. The ones the Corlith packs avoid. Just special forces," Jake corrected. "Nothing special about it." The captain's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "You tell yourselves this lie. We have heard the stories. Human warriors who do not stop, who do not surrender, who hunt across light years for revenge. The galaxy should fear what happens when you threaten civilians under human protection." Lisa's voice came over the comm. "Engineering secure. Found their cargo manifest. They've hit 18 ships in the last year. Killed crews. Sold passengers. There's a buyer's list." Jake's finger tightened on the trigger. Just slightly. The Korthax captain noticed. "You will execute me," it said. "Not a question. No. You're going to trial. You're going to explain to a human court exactly what you did to those people. Then you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, thinking about the mistake you made. Death would be preferable. I know." They secured the captain and rounded up the surviving crew. The hauler's computer core held evidence of dozens of crimes. Coordinates of pirate bases. Names of buyers in the flesh trade. It was an intelligence windfall, the kind that would keep fleet prosecutors busy for months. Peter Walsh met them at the airlock, looking at the restrained Korthax with unconcealed hatred. "My cousin was on the Meridian Star. It disappeared 8 months ago on this route." Jake checked the manifest Lisa had pulled. The Meridian Star was there, listed with a sale date and buyer code. "I'm sorry," Jake said, and meant it. "We'll find them. Everyone they took. Every ship they hit. We'll find them." Peter nodded slowly. "The stories are true then. About what you people do. We're just special forces," Jake said again. "We do the job." But as he watched the fear in the Korthax captain's eyes, he knew the truth. Humans had brought something into the galaxy that other species hadn't encountered before. Not superior technology. Not overwhelming numbers. Just the absolute refusal to let crimes go unpunished. To let predators operate with impunity. And the training, the relentless training, to back up that refusal with action. The galaxy had hoped never to face them. But hope wasn't a strategy, and the Korthax had learned that lesson too late. The fleet carrier Resolute hung in high orbit over Centauri Station, like a promise of violence. Jake's team materialized in the main hangar bay 6 hours after delivering the Korthax pirates to custody. The deck crew barely glanced at them. Special forces coming and going was routine here. Part of the endless cycle of operations that kept human space secure. Commander Helen Foster met them at the debriefing room. She was regular Navy, a lifer who'd commanded destroyers before moving to logistics and coordination. She understood what Jake's unit did, even if she'd never done it herself. "The Korthax captain is talking," she said without preamble. "He gave up 17 base locations, 43 ship identifications, and names. Lots of names. Some of them surprised us." "How surprised?" Lisa asked. 3 Vrexian Dominion officials, 2 Human Corporation executives, and a sitting council member from the Telrax Union. "The slave trade goes deeper than we thought." Away. Deeper 30. "The slave trade goes deeper than we thought." The room went quiet. Slavery had been extinct in human space for centuries, a horror relegated to history texts. Finding it alive and thriving in the neighboring sectors, with human involvement, was like discovering a cancer growing in tissue thought healthy. "What's the mission?" Jake asked. Helen pulled up a holographic display. A space station materialized above the table, massive and irregular, built into a dead asteroid. Obsidian. Deep. It's in unclaimed space, technically neutral territory. Intelligence estimates 3,000 permanent residents, all criminals. It's where they process the merchandise. Merchandise. Jake's hands clenched under the table. People, reduced to commodities, bought and sold like equipment. Fleet can't touch it without starting an incident. Helen continued. The Vrexians would claim provocation. The Telrax Union would file protests. Half the Galactic Council would line up to condemn human aggression. But a small team, Danny said slowly, conducting a rescue operation. That's different. Officially, you're not going there. Officially, you're on a training exercise near the frontier. What you do with your free time is your business. Jake studied the station's layout. It was a nightmare of overlapping jurisdictions and gray areas. Exactly the kind of place that attracted the worst elements of a dozen species. Heavy security, private military contractors, automated defenses. "How many prisoners?" Amy asked. "At least 200, based on the manifests we recovered. Maybe more. They're being held in the lower levels, awaiting transport to buyers across the sector." "Extraction plan?" Lisa said. "You get them to the docking port at Section 7. We'll have a ship waiting. Running dark. You'll have a 6-hour window. After that, station security will lock down everything, and you'll be trapped. 6 hours to infiltrate a criminal stronghold, locate 200 prisoners, fight through whatever security stood between them and freedom, and get everyone to the extraction point." It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of mission Jake's team trained for. "We'll need 4 more operators," Jake said. "Kevin Park, Nicole Adams, Chris Bennett, and Ryan Lee. They're on rotation at the training center." Helen nodded. "Already recalled them. They'll meet you at the prep bay in 3 hours. You deploy in 8. The briefing continued for another hour, running through intelligence estimates, security patterns, and contingency plans. The more Jake learned about Obsidian Deep, the worse it looked. The station wasn't just defended, it was a fortress. The criminals who ran it had money, resources, and no moral constraints. But they weren't special forces. They hadn't spent years learning how to turn impossible situations into successful operations. They relied on their defenses, their numbers, their assumption that no one would be crazy enough to attack them. That assumption was about to cost them everything. The prep bay was a controlled chaos of equipment checks and final briefings. Kevin Park arrived first. A demolitions expert who could make explosives from household chemicals. Nicole Adams came next, a sniper whose longest confirmed kill was 3 kilometers in high wind. Chris Bennett and Ryan Lee completed the team. Both close-quarters specialists who'd trained together so long they moved like one person. "Heard we're breaking into a slave market," Kevin said cheerfully. "About time we did something fun. It's a fortress," Lisa corrected. "With professional security and automated defenses. Like I said, fun." Jake laid out the plan. They'd approach in a civilian cargo hauler, docking as a supply delivery. Amy would spoof the station's systems to make their credentials look legitimate. Once inside, they'd split into 3 teams. Jake, Lisa, and Chris would locate and secure the prisoners. Danny, Nicole, and Ryan would disable security and create escape routes. Kevin and Amy would handle technical support and ensure their extraction ship could dock. Rules of engagement? Chris asked. Anyone working security on that station knows what they're guarding. They made their choice. But we're not there for revenge. We're there for the prisoners. They're the priority. Always. They geared up in silence. Body armor. Designed to stop plasma rounds. Weapons that ranged from suppressed rifles to breaching charges. Helmets with full sensor suites. Medical kits rated for a dozen different species. Each operator carried enough equipment to fight their way across a small moon. The cargo hauler was cramped and uncomfortable. Exactly what a legitimate supply ship would be. Amy sat at the controls, feeding false manifests and forged credentials into the station's traffic control. The computer accepted them without question. Criminal operations relied on volume, on processing so many transactions that individual shipments didn't get scrutinized. Docking in 5 minutes, Amy announced. Station security is running standard patrols. No alerts, no unusual activity. They have no idea we're coming. Jake checked his rifle one final time. Around him, his team performed the same rituals they'd done hundreds of times before. The small actions that centered the mind, that pushed away fear and doubt and left only purpose. The hauler touched down with a slight jolt. The airlock cycled, and they were in. Obsidian deep, smelled of recycled air and desperation. The docking bay was automated, no personnel visible. Perfect. They moved through the corridors like shadows, following the map Amy had assembled from stolen schematics. Down 3 levels, through maintenance passages meant for repair drones. The first guard they encountered died before he could raise an alarm. The second managed to key his radio, but Lisa's blade made sure nothing intelligible came out. They were committed now, on the clock, racing against the moment when station security realized something was wrong. The prison level was worse than Jake had imagined. Cells crammed with beings from a dozen species, humans among them. Children staring with hollow eyes. The smell of unwashed bodies, and fear. Holy hell, Chris whispered. Get them out. Jake ordered. All of them. Now. The cell locks were biometric, designed to respond only to authorized personnel. Kevin solved that problem with a universal bypass that sparked and smoked but did the job. Doors hissed open along the entire corridor, revealing prisoners who'd stopped believing in rescue. We're human military, Jake announced, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. We're getting you out. Follow instructions, stay together, and stay quiet. We will protect you. A human woman stumbled forward, her face bruised and gaunt. This is real? You're actually here? We're here. What's your name? Katie Morris. I was on the science vessel Aurora. They took us 3 months ago. Jake's jaw clenched. The Aurora had been listed as lost with all hands. A reactor failure. No one had known to look for survivors in a slave market. Not anymore. You're going home. The prisoners began emerging. Hesitant at first. Then in a rush. 200 souls. Just as intelligence had estimated. Some could walk. Others needed support. Jake's team moved among them, doing quick medical assessments, identifying who needed immediate help. We've got a problem. Amy's voice crackled over the comm. Station security just went to alert status. They found the bodies at checkpoint 3. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they lock down this entire sector. 20 minutes to move 200 weakened, traumatized prisoners through a hostile station to an extraction point 3 levels up. Math that didn't work. Logistics that failed on every level. Then we make our own route, Jake said. Kevin, can you breach the hull at Section 7? Not without explosives that'll kill everyone in a 3-corridor radius. What about the service lifts? The ones that move cargo between levels? Amy pulled up schematics. There's one 200 meters from your position. It goes straight to the docking level. But it's in the middle of a security hub. You'll have to fight through. Better than trying to escort 200 people through combat zones. Danny. How's the security situation looking? Danny's voice came back tense. They're mobilizing response teams, professional contractors, not station thugs. Maybe 60 personnel, all armed, all experienced. They're setting up choke points at every major junction. Nicole added her report. I can slow them down from here. Got sightlines on 3 approach corridors. But once they figure out where I am, they'll come hard. Do it. Buy us the time we need. The prisoners moved like a ragged column. Those who could walk helping those who couldn't. Jake's team formed a defensive perimeter. Weapons trained on every approach vector. The station's corridors were narrow, designed for efficient foot traffic, not mass movement. Progress was agonizingly slow. The first security team hit them at Junction 12. 6 contractors in armor. Weapons raised. Shouting for surrender. Lisa dropped 2 before they could fire. Chris took a third with a burst that turned the bulkhead behind it into shrapnel. The others retreated. Contact forward, Lisa reported calmly. They're testing our response. Keep moving. Jake ordered the prisoners. Don't stop. Don't panic. We've done this before. That was a lie. They'd done extractions before, but never with this many civilians. Never in this kind of environment. But the prisoners needed to believe. Needed to trust that the humans with weapons knew what they were doing. Nicole's rifle cracked in the distance, a sound that carried through the station's metal walls. 4. Down at checkpoint 7. They're trying to flank through the maintenance level. Ryan, intercept them, Jake said. On it. The security forces were adapting, trying to box them in. But adaptation took time, required communication and coordination. Jake's team had trained together for years, knew each other's movements without needing orders. They flowed through the station like water, always moving, never giving the defenders a chance to set up a solid line. The service lift was ahead. A massive cargo platform designed to move mining equipment. It was also guarded by 12 contractors in hardened positions. Weapons trained on the only approach. They're dug in, Chris observed. Direct assault would be suicide. Then we don't assault directly. Kevin. What's below that platform? Kevin checked his data pad. Maintenance substructure. Access tunnels for repair crews. Can we breach up through it? With the right explosives. Yeah. Give me 2 minutes. They didn't have 2 minutes. The security forces were closing in from behind. The prisoners were exhausted and terrified. And the extraction window was shrinking with every second. Amy, can you override the lift controls? Jake asked. Not remotely. The security hub has it locked down. Someone would need to physically access the control panel. Where is it? 20 meters from the contractor's position. You'd be exposed the entire way. Jake looked at his team. At Lisa, who'd saved his life in the Orion raids. At Chris, who'd carried a wounded operator 8 kilometers through hostile territory. At the 7 others who'd volunteered for missions that had no guarantee of survival. I'll go, he said. Cover fire on my mark. Everyone else, get ready to move the prisoners onto that platform the second it's clear. Jake, that's insane, Lisa said. You'll be cut down before you make it 10 meters. You have a better idea? She didn't. None of them did. Jake checked his rifle, said a silent prayer to gods he didn't believe in, and stepped into the corridor. The contractors opened fire immediately. Plasma bolts turned the air into superheated hell. Jake ran, weaving and ducking, trusting his armor to stop what it could. He felt impacts, the suit's trauma systems injecting pain suppressors as rounds punched through layers of protection. 10 meters. His team's covering fire forced the contractors to keep their heads down. 15 meters. His leg went numb, whether from injury or adrenaline he didn't know. 20 meters. He slammed into the control panel, fingers flying across the interface. The lift's security protocols were military-grade, designed to resist hacking. But they weren't designed to resist someone with physical access and a shaped breaching charge placed directly on the processing unit. The explosion was small, contained, but it wiped the lift's control system completely. Emergency protocols kicked in, and the platform began descending to the loading level. Jake didn't see what happened next. The contractor's fire found him. Multiple hits to the chest and abdomen. His armor held, mostly, but the impacts threw him back against the bulkhead. His vision swam, his breath came in gasps. "Jake's down," he heard Lisa shout. Then she was there, dragging him behind cover, her hands checking for wounds. "I'm okay," he managed. "Get the prisoners on the lift." "You're bleeding out." "After. Prisoners first. Always." The platform reached their level. Kevin's explosives went off below. And suddenly there was chaos, as contractors found themselves taking fire from an unexpected direction. Ryan and Danny erupted from the maintenance tunnels, catching the security forces between two fires. It was over in seconds. The contractors broke, falling back to regroup. Jake's team herded the prisoners onto the lift, counting heads, making sure everyone was accounted for. The lift ride up felt like it took hours. Katie Morris knelt beside Jake, using medical supplies from his kit to patch the worst of his wounds. Her hands shook, but her eyes were determined. "You came for us," she said quietly. "No one comes for slaves. No one risks this much." "We're not no one," Jake replied through gritted teeth. "We're just special forces." The lift reached the docking level with a shudder. The extraction ship was there, exactly where Helen had promised. Its boarding ramp already lowered. Jake's team moved the prisoners aboard in a controlled rush, weapons trained on every approach corridor. "We've got incoming," Nicole reported from her overwatch position. 40 contractors, maybe more. They're massing for a final push. "Everyone on board?" Jake asked. Lisa did a final count. "Everyone's accounted for. All personnel present and secured. Then we leave." "Nicole, Ryan, collapse back to the ship. Kevin, blow the docking clamps." The station's security forces hit them just as the last operator reached the boarding ramp. It was desperate, chaotic, a final attempt to prevent the prisoners' escape. Plasma fire tore through the docking bay, turning cargo containers into molten slag. Jake's team held the ramp, buying precious seconds for the ship to complete its separation sequence. They were outnumbered 5-1, fighting an enemy that knew every angle, every piece of cover. But numbers didn't matter when you'd trained for exactly this scenario. When you'd run these drills until they were burned into muscle memory. Kevin's charges blew. The ship lurched free from the station's docking ports. Emergency thrusters firing. The boarding ramp began closing. Jake's team falling back in sequence. "We're clear," the pilot announced. "Engaging primary drives in 3, 2, 1. The ship punched away from Obsidian Deep with enough acceleration to press everyone to the deck. Through the viewport, Jake watched the station shrink, watched its weapons tracking them, but not firing. They wouldn't risk it, wouldn't chance hitting the wrong ship and bringing down fleet retaliation. The operations bay was crowded with prisoners, with people who'd thought they'd die as merchandise, who'd lost hope of ever seeing home again. They stared at Jake's team with expressions that mixed awe and disbelief. "You actually did it," Katie said. "You raided a fortress for us. Just our job," Jake said, but the words felt hollow. It was more than a job. It was a commitment, a promise that humanity made to everyone under its protection. "You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. We will come for you." The Resolute took them aboard 3 hours later. Medical teams swarmed the prisoners, treating malnutrition and injuries and trauma that went deeper than physical wounds. Fleet intelligence descended on the freed captives, collecting testimony that would fuel prosecutions across a dozen systems. Commander Foster met Jake in the medical bay, where doctors were working on the plasma burns that had cooked through his armor. 3 human executives arrested an hour ago, she reported. The Vrexian officials have disappeared, probably fled beyond the frontier. The Telrax council member is screaming diplomatic immunity. What about the station? Jake asked. Fleet's moving on it now. 2 battle groups, full authorization. They'll evacuate any remaining prisoners and then reduce Obsidian Deep to debris. Good. Helen studied him for a moment. You know what you did today will be all over the galactic networks by tomorrow. Human special forces, raiding a neutral station, extraction under fire, 200 prisoners freed. Some species are going to call it aggression. Some species can shut up, Jake said flatly. We saved lives. That's what matters. I agree. But there are consequences. The galaxy is going to ask questions about what makes human special forces so effective. Why our operators can do things that other species' elite units can't manage. Jake thought about his team. About the years of training. The doctrine built on centuries of hard-won experience. He thought about the refusal to accept defeat, to leave anyone behind, to let evil operate unchecked. You can tell them it's the training, he said. Tell them it's the equipment, the support systems, whatever technical explanation makes them feel better. But the truth is simpler than that. What's the truth? We care. Every operator in these units volunteered, knowing they might die on some distant rock nobody's ever heard of. They train until their bodies break, and then they train more. They do it because they believe that every innocent life matters, that freedom is worth fighting for, that monsters shouldn't be allowed to win. Helen nodded slowly. The other species don't understand that. Most of them have militaries for territorial defense. For maintaining order, the concept of special operations forces dedicated to protecting anyone, anywhere, regardless of politics or profit, it's alien to them. Then they'll learn. Because we're not stopping. Every slave market, every pirate stronghold, every place where people are suffering because they can't defend themselves, we're coming. They wanted to know what makes us different. That's what makes us different. The medical team finished their work and cleared Jake for light duty. He found his team in the ready room, cleaning weapons and writing after-action reports. They looked exhausted, beat up. But there was satisfaction in their eyes. Katie Morris asked me to thank you, Lisa said. All the prisoners did. They want to know your names. Want to remember who saved them. Tell them we're just special forces, Jake said. That's all they need to know. Danny laughed. You realize that's not going to work anymore, right? The whole galaxy just watched us pull off something they said was impossible. They're going to want to know more about these humans who raid fortresses. Let them wonder, Jake said. Keeps them nervous. The door opened, and Helen walked in with a new briefing folder. Jake recognized the look on her face. The expression that said another crisis was brewing somewhere in the black. Already? Chris said. We just got back. There's a research station on the frontier, Helen said. It went silent 2 days ago. Last transmission mentioned unknown contacts and requested immediate assistance. Fleets stretched thin with the Obsidian Deep operation. Jake looked at his team. They were wounded, exhausted, running on fumes. They should refuse, should demand the rest they'd earned. But he saw the same look in their eyes that he felt in his own heart. How far? He asked. 12 hours at max burn. We'll need fresh equipment and full medical clearance for everyone. And I want Kevin to have access to the demolitions locker. Helen smiled. Already arranged. You deploy in 6 hours. After she left, Lisa turned to Jake. You know, we can't keep doing this forever. Eventually, the odds are going to catch up with us. I know, and we do it anyway. We do it anyway, because that was what Special Forces meant. Not just in capability, but in commitment. It meant being the person who stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. It meant training harder, fighting smarter, and never, ever giving up on those who needed help. The galaxy had hoped never to face them, had hoped that humanity's reputation for relentless protection of innocent lives was exaggerated. But Jake and his team weren't an exaggeration. They were the promise made real. The guarantee that cruelty would be answered, that predators would be hunted, that no one was beyond rescue. They were just special forces. And across the galaxy, criminals and slavers and monsters of every species were learning to fear what that meant. The operations board lit up with new mission parameters. Jake studied the data, already formulating the plan, already thinking 3 steps ahead. His team gathered around, professional and ready, willing to go back into the black, because somewhere out there, people needed help. And helping people. Protecting the innocent. Facing impossible odds with nothing but skill and determination. That was what they did. That was what being human special forces meant. The galaxy had hoped never to face them. But the galaxy didn't get to make that choice. Because where there was injustice, where there was suffering, where evil thought it could operate without consequence, humans like Jake and his team would be there. Just special forces, nothing more, and absolutely nothing less.